This is Ed Rep Radio, presented by Eastman Music Company. This is Ed Rep Radio, a podcast to bring you ideas and information from industry experts you can use on the road every day. Presented by Eastman Music Company, and I'm your host, Shane Duell. Welcome back. We hope you've been enjoying the first season of Ed Rep Radio, and if you haven't had a chance to listen to that first season, I invite you to go take some time after this episode to check out some of the great guests we had on last spring. We are very happy to be back now with the start of Season 2, and our first guest of this new season is a very special person whom many of you know or have heard of his name and his company. Today I'm joined by George Quinlan Jr., owner of the Quinlan and Fabish Music Company based out of Chicago. George has a unique perspective on Ed Reps because not only does he own and operate one of the most successful music stores in the country with a team of fabulous Ed Reps, George is still an Ed Rep himself with a regular route. You'll hear his perspective as an Ed Rep, his broader view as a business owner, and some really interesting history from the school music world that everybody should know. George, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Shane. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. And if anyone's been around the industry for a while, especially something like NASMD, the name George Quinlan Jr. or George Quinlan Sr. is a very familiar name, and so is the Quinlan and Fabish music store. I'd love to dig into your background first, your history in the music industry, and kind of how you got to be where you are today.
Oh, okay. Well, our family and our business is based in the Chicago area. And so I went through high school band and came time to go to college. And I had seen that some of the biggest names that I recognized were teaching at the University of Miami. That was like Frederick Fennell, Alfred Reed, John Kenyon, names that I had actually heard of, Clifton Williams. And so I convinced my dad that that was the best school for me to attend. And I'm sitting here in a January morning and there's snow on the ground. And I think it was a good decision,
right?
For a lot of reasons, but the school was awesome. They also had a music business program way back when. I think they were one of the first, administered by Alfred Reed. And so I got a nice background, and part of the program was an internship in your final semester or your final year. So because we had a few connections, I was able to get a internship at what was then the Selmer Company in Elkhart. That was before all the mergers and acquisitions. So I spent a semester learning about that side of the business, and thought that I was very well prepared to come back into our family business, only to find out that I wasn't, because my dad wouldn't hire me.
Oh, no
He's
kidding.
like, no. I think you should get some experience outside of our family business. And so I, not reluctantly, but I was a little discouraged that I couldn't get a job at my own family business. So I took a job at Selmer and worked there for about a year or so. And one of their sales managers, Selmer to LeBlanc, they were independent companies at the time, and he called me up and offered me a job there. So I made the move. It was only just on the other side of Chicago, really, and up in Wisconsin, and spent a year or so there and got to spend time with Vito Pascucci, who is one of the legends of the band instrument industry anyway.
Right.
And also got to meet for the first time Bob Scheiweiler, who became a friend and somewhat of a mentor for me and a competitor, ironically. All three during the course of our friendship. He just passed away about a year ago. So then after my short-term employment at LeBlanc, I was hired at Quinlan and Fabish in 1979. And been here since.
Wow. You've got some experience in this industry.
Yeah.
And you've also been involved with, speaking of the industry, other groups like NASMD and board positions and things like that. What else are you involved in right now, or over the past?
Yeah. Well, I've served terms on both NASMD and NAM, their boards, and gone through the officers at NASMD. I also have spent a lot of time, probably 20 years, on the board of Vandercook College of Music here in Chicago, and then a couple smaller arts advocacy boards in the area, things like that, and the Music Achievement Council, which I think a lot of your listeners will be familiar with because of the first performance and some of the Marsha Neal seminars that are done at state meetings. So I've been part of that group probably for 8 to 10 years, something like that. So
wow.
I have a lot of part-time jobs.
Yeah, you do.
None of them pay, ironically.
and we'll get to more of that, the parts that do pay in a moment here. But that's amazing, George. You're so involved. And I have to say, having known you for several years now, you really strike me as someone with a true passion for music.
Well, I think I do, and we all do here. And I think we're in our second generation. It started with the first generation. You know, most of, like my father and a lot of those World War II vets who did start similar businesses, they were musicians and teachers and music store owners and all kinds of things. They were very passionate about music education. They basically built the system that we enjoy now, students and teachers. It wasn't really that way prior to World War II.
That's a really interesting topic. When I was in your store back in, I think it was October, you showed us this room that had all sorts of really interesting news articles and things that showed the industry's involvement in music education to get it started. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I don't think that's a story that a lot of people really know today.
Yeah. And oddly, I didn't know it either until some friends of mine, educators who are all into history, started sharing things. And then I started asking people, especially older people older than me. There are a few, not anymore. But anyway, so the thing that totally surprised me was back in the 30s, C.G. Kahn, the company, and I believe it was Greenleaf, the owner, or chairman, whatever he was, started a school to train band directors. And the way I understand it is that live music was starting to go on the downward stretch because recorded music had started to become available. And so the need to have live musicians in every restaurant and venue and theaters and, silent movies now had sound, was starting to wane. And they had a few models in place already, some school bands. There was one that's been in our area, Joliet, since 1912.
Wow.
So they had some of these schools that had something, some sort of a band activity related to the school. And I think they saw that was the future in the 30s. And so they started a school. I'm not sure the exact name, but it was like the Kahn, Band Institute or something. And that's also right about the time Vandercook College of Music started to do the same thing. And suddenly it became a profession where you could be a professional band, bandmaster, I think they were called back then, or band director. And again, it was founded by Kahn, mostly because I think they had to figure out how are we going to sell all these cornets and double-belled euphoniums that we're making.
They created a market.
Yeah. And it really hit home, 25 years ago when we had Bill Ludwig. Of course, Ludwig Drums was based in Chicago as well. And he would, by the time the chief, Bill Ludwig Jr. came along, school music was becoming mainstream and, it was in pretty much most of the schools. But then it was like, all right, now we need to make it better and better. And he had an interesting story, because the Midwest Clinic started right after World War II. Then, by the way, I'm on the board of the Midwest Clinic too. I should have mentioned that earlier. Sorry. So he had an interesting story because, from the percussion end of things, he said they would commission somebody like Alfred Reed or a prominent composer in the day to write a piece that would feature, say, something new that they were starting to make concert chimes or a vibraphone or something that wasn't part of the standard marching band or, bass drum, snare drum, cymbals, percussion section, to kind of grow the percussion section and add colors. And so they would commission somebody, and then the piece would be played at the Midwest Clinic by probably Vandercook College. And then the band directors would run to the booth and order their new instruments. So, it was kind of like the industry helping the teachers, by inventing new products and new sounds, and then the composers reacting. And, it's really interesting, the marriage between the music industry and education.
Right.
And then the music store is somewhere in the middle there too.
Right. Do you think teachers know that story? Do you think they know how involved the industry was at the very beginning of what we know today as school music? And do they know today how much we do behind the scenes?
No, that room that we were sitting in when you were here, when we bring them in there, their eyes are really big. It's like, oh my God, no, I had no idea. Why would they? Especially a young teacher. They've grown up where music has been a staple for from their existence from 5th grade through 12th. They didn't really know how it happened, but they enjoyed it and they thrived in it. But somebody had to create it. And it was really that generation right around World War II, when they were trying to figure out what's the next thing.
Right. All the musicians came home from the war and they were looking for something to do. So they created music stores and became music teachers, right?
A lot of them. And then, of course, Kahn also started a dealer training program and a repair tech training program, because once the instruments were in these kids' hands, somebody had to learn how to fix them.
It's amazing. It's funny, we all think music has just been around forever, and school music has been around forever, but really it's been less than 100 years.
Yeah. 2 generations, really. We're on probably the 3rd.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think teachers should know that. And ed reps listening, now that you know a little bit of history, maybe, talk to teachers about how involved the industry was at the beginning and still is today. Because I having been an ed rep myself, I know teachers sometimes just kind of take for granted what we do, and they don't realize how much we do.
Yeah.
I remember taking a band director to NASMD years ago, and it was a panel discussion of band directors. And it was interesting talking to him after he'd been there for a day or two. And I said, is it different than what you expected? He said, this is totally different than what I expected. I thought you guys would be talking about how to trick band directors into buying more stuff. And I didn't hear one thing like that. It's all about how do we support music education? How do we help band directors? It was really eye-opening for him.
Yeah. I think that's one of the unique aspects of school music, is that, nobody gets here by accident. Nobody gets here, to think they're going to have a exponential growth business that's going to just multiply year after year. Very slow and steady business. So the people that get into it generally are passionate about, because they enjoyed that as a student. So they, as they become adults, they gravitate towards the things they really enjoy and benefited from. And so very few people seem to get out of the business because it's such a great place to be. It's amazing how, well, we're talking about ed reps, how many will stay on the job for their whole career in many cases. Same with our manufacturer representatives. A lot of them are career, band or orchestra people.
And great people at that. It's just so nice to get together. And I look forward to NASMD this March to see everybody again after a while. It's just a really passionate, great, warm group of people.
Yeah, really is.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the Quinlan and Fabish music store. And we've caught already that your dad had started this. Can you tell us a little bit how it started, and also who's Fabish?
That's a good question. In fact, when my dad passed away, it's now about 7, 8 years ago, I realized that at some point people are going to assume that I was the Quinlan and never know who the Fabish was. So at our orientation, we have a slideshow called Who's Fabish? and we teach everybody who works here who Fabish was, and of course Quinlan as well. And Fabish was actually my dad's high school band director. So picture, a young high school kid and a young teacher who's just, like 21 years old. Well, you're 8 years older than your freshman group, or maybe 6.
Yeah, right.
And Fabish was 8 years older than my dad. And they met as a teacher-student relationship, and my dad was one of his top students. And so they formed a friendship. And then, of course, World War II, my dad played in the Army bands. And when he came back, he had already finished his undergrad degree. So he was teaching. And at that time, Carl Fisher, which was, now it's a publisher, but back then they were a retailer of not only music, print music, but everything. They had instruments and all kinds of things. And there was a street in Chicago called Wabash Avenue that was the Chicago version of Music Row, like 48th Street in New York, where there were dozens of music stores. And so my dad also worked at Carl Fisher till they unilaterally just made the choice to abandon retail sales of instruments and focus only on print and publishing. And so they kind of let these sales reps go, and they formed other businesses. There were 3 or 4 of them, and 2 of them were Quinlan and Fabish. So they both worked at Carl Fisher. They started a company in 1952. So this would have been 70 years ago, that didn't last very long. It was downtown on Music Row, and they were just really servicing their own school bands. Most of them were parochial schools at that time. And so it lasted a year or 2, and then they moved it to our neighborhood and kind of regrouped and started Quinlan and Fabish in 1959. So been about 62 years, something like that.
Yeah, amazing. And now on its 2nd generation.
And yeah, technically, as of yesterday, our 3rd generation as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, well, I have 3 children. Paige, my daughter, joined the company about 1.5 years ago.
Okay.
And yesterday, my son, who's George Andrew Quinlan III, joined the company yesterday.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. That's very cool to see.
Yeah, we're excited.
It's great to see generation after generation taking up the helm.
Yeah, we're a distance away from some of those even older companies that are still family owned. I keep thinking of Schmidt Music. They are now on their 5th generation of Schmidt.
It is. Yeah, with Peter Schmidt.
Yeah.
It is.
It's so great to see.
Yeah. Speaking of, people sticking around the industry for a while, that's a great example.
Yeah.
So today, Quinlan and Fabish, your headquarters is in Burr Ridge, and you have more than one location now, it sounds like. Can you give us a little bit of a lay of the land?
Yeah. Over a period of years, we kind of expanded mostly through acquisitions and some organic growth. So in the Chicago area, because there's a lot of people all jammed together in several counties, we have 3 stores. The distance is not the thing, it's the time. It can take you a long time to get from one place to the other.
Yes, it can.
So we have 3 that kind of, we're right on the lake there. So we have a north side, a south side, and a west side. And so and those are mostly suburban. So there's 3 in the Chicago area. And then we have a large presence in Indiana with smaller population, smaller cities. So there's actually 5 stores in Indiana. And then there's 1 in Southwest Michigan, right over the Indiana border.
Okay.
So there's 9 altogether.
Wow. So amongst all those stores, you must have a team of ed reps out there.
Oh, yeah.
How many do you have on the road now?
We have 23 and a half.
Wow.
And a half.
Wow. That's got to be one of the biggest ed rep teams in the country.
It could be, or probably one of them. We focus on the quality really more than the quantity. So we're really proud of those people. And we're really proud that I think now we have 4 or 5 of them are women.
Great.
For a long time, it was male driven. It's great to see women enjoying that role and thriving as well.
Absolutely. So I'd like to share a little anecdote from probably about 10 years ago. My in-laws live literally less than a mile from your Burr Ridge store. So when I go back there, I know that Quinlan and Fabish is just down the road. It was about 10 years ago. I was visiting my in-laws and I thought, I'm just going to pop down to see Quinlan and Fabish, see if George is in, and say hello. So I go down there, and it's a great facility, huge warehouse, repair facility, and retail space. And I ask somebody, hey, is George around? They said, oh, no, he's out running his school route. And I stopped for a second. Wait, George owns Quinlan and Fabish. He's out on a school route? He must be substituting for a rep that's sick. Oh, no, he has a regular school route. It really blew my mind, George, that you are an ed rep. You're an ed rep and an owner, which tells me there's a reason you're out there on the road. And I'd love to know, I mean, obviously you could hire more ed reps. It's not about, not having enough people. You must want to do it. Why do you like being out there on the road?
Well, first of all, I like the camaraderie, everything about that role. But the other part of it as an owner is that I try to not have the schools that I do work with, and there's far fewer than 10 years ago, but given any special treatment in terms of pricing or, expedited service for repairs or any of that, because it gives me or special orders, gives me the opportunity to see how our systems work. If we say we guarantee 1 week turnaround, on repairs, do we hit that mark, 90% of the time, 100% of the time? How good are we, that we say we do this? And how good are we at, turning around special orders for print music or, something we don't have in stock so that it gets to the director quickly. So it's that perspective too. It actually helps me as an owner to just go, we need to shore up this part of our operation. It's not as strong as we think it is,
Sure. If it is a trouble for you, it's a trouble for the rest of your reps, right? And all the other teachers.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So I'd like to dig into what you feel are some really important skills that an ed rep needs to have. What do you think is a few of the most important things that a rep needs to have to be successful?
Yeah. Well, people skills, I think, are paramount. Once, you have somebody that's got a pleasant personality, I think some of their natural curiosity helps because nobody has all the answers. Everybody has some of them. And by having a natural curiosity, you ask really good questions. And I think sometimes that is the art of salesmanship, is asking really good questions and then listening for the answers, because you learn a lot, especially as a road person. If you ask diving questions where you dive into a topic, you learn a lot about that teacher's role. And then you become a resource for the next teacher, because you've absorbed knowledge from 10 teachers. And now when you have a new teacher who's number 11, you can share some of those ideas that you learned from maybe more experienced teachers. So I really like that natural curiosity and the concern and the willingness to continue learning, because that I think becomes one of the most important skills that a rep can have. The second part, which is very important, is time management and their organizational skills. It's frustrating for me as to see some people do the same work over and over. It's like, if you had done it this way, it would have been much more efficient and you'd have time available to do other things. So time management is really crucial to an ed rep and their organizational skills. And then probably the third thing that I think is important is punctuality. We had a rep who was a rep for a different company and then ours, and every one of his customers would say, I can set my clock to him. I know he is going to walk in precisely at 9:57 on Friday morning, rain or shine, didn't matter. And that's important because teachers have very little time. And if you're punctual, you're there right when they're ready to meet with you and talk with you. And if you run late or, that type of thing, it gets frustrating for the teachers because they may want to share time with you, but their job is to teach. And if you're there on their teaching time, it's just puts pressure on the teacher and the rep. So punctuality is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you build good relationships? Let's say you're brand new to the job. And I'm sure you've seen new reps come on to Quinlan and Fabish, and you had to train them to get started. How do you start building relationship from scratch?
Well, one of the things that's fortunate about our business is because our reps stay on the job for so long, we don't have that many.
Huh.
But what's happened is my generation, the baby boomers, they're all aging out. So some people have been on their job 20, 30, 40 years, and it's time to retire. And so for about the last 10 years, we've been building our bench through a rep mentoring program. And so we don't put somebody in that position unless we have really great confidence that they know exactly what they're in for and that they embrace it, that this is something they really want to do. So we've been very fortunate through the years because they don't just really dive into the deep end and hope for the best. They are kind of groomed for the position by substituting and going to rental nights and, filling in, and then sometimes just traveling with experienced reps so that they can kind of learn and see. And some self-eliminate. They say, I thought I wanted to do this, but now that I see what's involved, it really doesn't fit. It's not a good fit for me. And that's perfect for us because that person probably would have failed otherwise, if they had been trying to force a square peg into a round hole. They would have been frustrated. We would have been, the teachers would have been. So that's really helped us through this generational transition quite a bit. So once they're in the role, I think, again, it starts with that natural curiosity, so to speak, so that they can learn about their customers. When Facebook first came out, we had our baby boomer reps, and back then it was radical. It's like, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And so I did we have a rep camp every summer. I did a little survey. I said, here's what I want you to do. Think of the customer the best, the band director or orchestra director. And I'm going to ask you questions, and I want you to write down the answers. And I'd say, okay, where did they go to school? Are they married? If they have children, what are the children's names and ages? Do they play in any community bands? Or, just questions that you naturally learn by seeing these people every week. And they, the experienced reps would all write it down. And they say, now give me the one the least, the maybe a new band director, and give me that same information. And, they struggled with that. I said, now go to this Facebook page, and this person is going to tell you all that stuff that took you 10 years to learn.
Right.
They're going to tell you on their Facebook page. And this can actually be an important tool for you to build relationships. So it is kind of interesting. The tools change, but the concern and the building of the relationship is constant. It's sometimes just the technology, so much to the point where once Facebook became a thing, when you go to like NASMD, you get input from other people. And at that time, people were saying, how to engage your audience with, your company through Facebook, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, oh, you could run a contest. So at one point we ran a contest, talk about the strength of a relationship between a teacher and an ed rep. And the contest just said, complete this thought. I like, because Facebook is all about likes. I like my Q&F rep because ... And they just had to finish the sentence. And the prize was custom made bobbleheads of themselves and their rep, which seemed kind of funny and silly. But we ran it for about 5, 7, 8 years, maybe something like that, always in April, because it was kind of a downtime. And the first year or two, people would just write some nice narratives. Mary is the best rep. She's always helped me out, blah, blah, blah. And then the next year, somebody maybe wrote a poem. And then the third year, somebody wrote a song and made a video of it. And by the fourth and fifth and sixth year, some of these teachers were making these beautiful tributes to their reps with the kids engaged with signs and playing music. And
wow.
I was like, man, they've spent a lot of time telling us how great their rep was.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so so it was really fun for a while, but the barrier to entry became so high that we've got fewer entries because, it's like, I'm not going to spend 3 weeks putting a video together to tell you how great your rep is. So we kind of put an end to it because of that, but it was really great. And a lot of times when we're talking here in our company about sales and salesmen, I think of, there's a book by Daniel Pink called To Sell is Human. And it talks about a word cloud that came about when they asked people what one word comes to mind when you hear the word salesman. And usually it's a negative term.
Mm-hmm.
Something like, I'm looking at it here, pushy, difficult, hard, yuck, ugh, sleazy. These are the most common terms. And about the most positive one might be, let's see here, essential. That's about as good as the average person. And so then when you think about the relationship between a salesperson and a customer in a normal situation, the customer always feels that way. Not a good relationship. So why do our customers go out of their way to tell us how great their reps are? I think school ed reps, not just our company, but in general, I think they transcend the regular client customer relationship. They develop a much deeper understanding of each other, and they rely on each other. And it happens for a long, long time. I mean, we literally have some reps who have had, me being one of them, customers that started in their first year and finished their career with that same rep.
Wow.
A 25, 30-year run. And so I think it's a fairly unique business model that, when I talk to people in other businesses, they kind of shake their heads, but it works. And it not only works for us, it works for a lot of our, peers in NASMD and places like that. So that I don't think you can overstate the relationship between teachers and ed reps, how important it is to a company like ours. It's just pretty much everything.
It's got to be unique in the music industry because the average turnover in the average industry is what, 3 years? Not in the music industry. I mean, like you said, we can have decades long relationships.
Yeah. Teachers tend to stay, and if they're happy, they stay in their job, and ed reps stay in theirs, and they develop lifelong friendships and partnerships. It's really special.
Absolutely. This may be an obvious question, but once you get this really solid relationship with your teachers, from a strictly, I guess, business standpoint, what does that do for you? Why is it so important to have a good relationship?
Well, inevitably things go wrong. Something bad can happen, or, something isn't right. And I think you have credentials at that point where they're like, you've been taking care of us for 10 years and year 11, this happened. We can work through this. Where, if it's more transactional, it's like, well, that was horrible. We'll just choose the next vendor. I think you do get a little bit of leeway, not for when things go wrong. Doesn't mean you want them to, but it does help to have that relationship intact. And part of our training that we talk about too is the relationship with the teacher is vital. Of course, we've been talking about that, but there's other people in the district who are very important as well for ed reps to develop a relationship with. And I always consider them, I call her Doris or Jan, because it's usually a woman who pays the bills.
Right.
And she's very important to that relationship. And then there's a guy I call Phil, and he's the custodian. He's the guy who knows where everything is and how to get everything done in the school. And then there's Dr. Big Boss, and that's, the superintendent. And our reps, we try to have relationships with everybody along that. But those three people are also vital, because if there's a billing error, Doris is not going to be happy. If, somehow we had a rental night and we didn't clean up afterwards and the room was a mess, Phil's not going to be happy. And, if there's a parent complaint about something, Dr. Big Boss is not going to be happy. And then, if we have a relationship with them, then it doesn't become a confrontation, it becomes a conversation. It becomes like, yeah, we had this parent and, let's say I go in and we're talking to Dr. Big Boss and they know who we are and what we've been doing. And they go, well, we've had a lot of problems with this parent in other areas. So, they give you a little bit of a break in the sense that we know who you are and what you stand for. And, we will handle it on our side. So it's great to have a relationship with the teachers, but sometimes there's a little more to it. I think it really just gives you a lot of safety.
Right. That's very smart. I'm curious, on the superintendent side, they have a separate office away from typically the school that they would visit. Would your ed rep actually go visit the superintendent in the district office?
Yeah. Yeah. We try and encourage them to, like in the summer, stop by, introduce themselves, and have your card. And it's really kind of funny in the summer. There's not a lot going on. Right. Sometimes, you just say, if Dr. So-and-so is here, is there any chance I could just meet him and or her and introduce myself? And they go, sure, come on back. And all of a sudden, you're on that person's radar. So yeah, they're very often happy to meet you. It's like, oh, I've heard a lot about your company. So, okay, so you're here every week. It's surprising. They really have no idea what we do, how it works. It's like, wait, you're here every week? Why are you here every week? Well, kids break instruments. Oh yeah, I never thought of that. And we loan them a different one so they can keep playing. So it helps for them to know who you are and what you stand for, and your relationship with the school and the kids in the programs.
That's really smart, George. If you don't do that as a rep, otherwise the superintendents would have no idea you're even out there, right?
Yeah, or a misunderstanding, far worse.
Right.
If a disgruntled competitor, threatens the school in some way, and they don't know who you are, they might just go, oh, well, let's get rid of this. Let's try something else. And
right.
All of a sudden, all that credibility you've tried to build up with just the educators could be gone because you didn't, follow up with other people in the district who are quite important to those decisions.
Right. That they can go to bat for you if something comes up.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'd like to dig into when your ed reps are out there, they're visiting band directors and string teachers, right?
Oh, sure.
And, in fact, one of our Eastman product managers in the string world is Jason Heath, and he was actually a Quinlan and Fabish customer as an orchestra teacher. So, and he always speaks very highly of his Quinlan and Fabish rep. I'd like to dig into, first of all, how do you teach your band playing ed reps to work well with string teachers?
Yeah, it's challenging in many ways, but everyone has strengths and everyone has weaknesses. And I think you have to be honest when you don't know something, that you don't make it up, or you don't try to say something that you think is true and find out it's not. So I think it's important that ed reps, if they're not, like, say if you're a band person, to don't overreach your expertise. Fortunately, in our company, and I think most of our peers, will have string experts in the company. And it's like, that's over my pay grade. Why don't we get this person in and we'll have a conference, we'll have a meeting or a phone call or whatever to talk through this, because I don't really know the answer to that question. But I think on the day-to-day activity, showing up, taking care of getting instruments repaired and size exchanges and all that kind of stuff, I think band people do very well as long as they learn the lingo. You don't want to call a violin a horn. That usually really upsets orchestra teachers when you say, I'll get the horns. And they look at you like, really? Did you just say that? And you're like, oh, I'm sorry. And I think you have to earn the right to call them fiddles. I found that too.
Oh,
Is that a string person can call it a fiddle, but a band person is not allowed to. At least that's my understanding
good
of
tip.
how that works. Yeah. Um, so I think that's important that you don't overreach your expertise and try to BS your way through it. It's like just to admit that it's not something you know, and you'll get the answer from somebody who does.
So a little humility there is good if you're not a string player.
Yeah, humility and honesty.
Yeah,
don't try to BS them because they know more than you.
Right, right.
They will see through that if you try and make stuff up.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Having talked to other ed reps who are out there in the field, some are actually kind of afraid to go into an orchestra room, and some even don't go into an orchestra room because they're afraid they'll be found out that they don't know a lot about orchestra. But it sounds like it's okay if you don't know a lot about orchestra. You can still be a good rep to them.
Yeah, we were like that. We didn't really have a lot of orchestra business until like 25, 30 years ago. So it seems a long time ago, but put it in perspective of a 60-year-old company, half of our existence was band only, essentially. And so what I found when we were just scratching the surface was that if you found a teacher who was willing to help you and guide you, they would help you make the right decisions. You'd say, well, we're thinking about getting some, violins for our rental program through this company. And they'd look and you'd go, no. They go, I've tried them. I don't think, why don't you try this or this? You go, oh, okay. They would actually, from their expertise, help you get started in the string business because, they're going to know what they're going to want. And, right. So they actually helped us. They'd find people for us. They found our string expert. It was like, I really need somebody, to do this in our company. They said, okay, we think we know somebody. He works at another string shop right now, but we'll talk to him.
That's amazing,
because they liked our company and they liked him, and they thought maybe it would work out if he worked for you. And actually he has. It's been 20 years or so.
That's great. So they become real advocates for you, it sounds like, if you just talk to them.
Yeah, I think if they know you're really trying to improve your business and your service to them, and you honestly want their help, and then if the other side of the coin is if they give you information and you don't use it, that could be a problem too. So you pretty much are gonna have to live by the sword and die by the sword as well. But they really helped us, get our foothold where we felt comfortable that we're as strong in strings as we are band. But it is a challenge. It seems like we're all school music, but we haven't even talked about choir programs.
Right.
That's something we don't do. So we are a little reluctant to walk into the choir room as well.
Sure.
Not knowing what we're talking about.
That's good advice on the orchestra programs. Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Sure.
So I want to zoom out. You're a unique person to talk to about being an ed rep, because not only are you an ed rep on the road, like everyone else listening, but you're also an owner, and you have a very different perspective on the bigger picture of the business. And I've wondered this quite often. So I can only imagine the expenses as a business owner that it takes to have even one ed rep. You have not just the ed rep and the salary and insurance and things that go along with that. You have the vehicle, you have the maintenance, you have the vehicle insurance, you have a plethora of expenses. I can only imagine. Why have ed reps? What's the real goal for a business owner to have this army of ed reps if it costs so much money to do it?
Well, I look at it like this. To be really good at school music, you have to have a pretty elaborate infrastructure. You have to have good repair techs. You have to have enough of them where the work will get done, in a week turnaround generally for most. You have to have good customer service people. If directors are recommending your store when they come in, the parents need to be conversing with people that know what they're talking about. You have to have pretty elaborate technology these days, a website, that a lot of them that they're customized just for their school, that kind of thing. You invest a lot of money into the school music side of things, and probably the least expensive part of the equation is the actual salary and
Hmm.
amount of money to keep somebody on the road. All those other things far exceed it. So it's probably the biggest and best investment you can make in school music is to have really good reps, because the way we look at it is we have this infrastructure in place with repairs, technology, inventory, everything I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And how is the rest of the world going to know about this except through an ed rep? So,
right. Good point.
Yeah, we embrace, I should say, a concept called intrapreneurs, entrepreneurs within the company.
Okay.
And as a result, I try to mention to our ed reps or emphasize that this is their business. This is Tom Fox Incorporated or Dan Halloran Company or Ashley Dowdle Inc. And it's her job or his job to grow the business that we currently have. And how do you do that? Well, that takes a lot of investment in time and energy and everything you can do to build this thing. And we're here to support them. We know that they're face to face with the customers every day. So we just have to provide that infrastructure so that when they give somebody their word, that it happens. And I say that because we're kind of a one-trick pony. This is really all we do. So, I know other companies, where they have a combo department and a large print department and, many other things where school music is only part of what they do. It can be, well, we've got a lot invested in other areas too. But since this is really all we do, it makes it a little easier for us to focus in on all the expenses, but particularly the important ones,
right?
The investments, so to speak.
Right.
There is one area that with COVID happening, with schools changing the way parent meetings run and things like that. For the last year and a half, 2 years now, we have kind of discouraged outside. Most when you have a rental night, you'll have a lot of, I call them the nice people. They're the people we hire to be nice,
right?
And, show up at a rental night and talk to the customers because it's chaotic or whatever. And we kind of encouraged all our reps to, as a cost saving venture, to help each other, because there were fewer nights and they were spread out and all that kind of thing. And then with the virtual component, you didn't know who was going to show up and who was not. And, it was very unpredictable. But what our reps did, the byproduct is it saved us lots of money paying outside people who were not nearly as effective as our own people.
Right.
And the reps learned from each other. They'd see what worked at a particular school and they go, I think I'm going to try this at this other school over here because that was very effective. So they, it was a good process. It saved us some money. You talk about, the cost structure. We would have, very large bills during the rental season for paying people to test kids and write contracts and all that kind of stuff. But with COVID, it was far less. And then the byproduct was that there were great results as well. So
yeah. So the ed reps role obviously changed a bit, or how they do things because of COVID, which makes me curious over the big picture of, school music starting back in the 1930s. Have ed reps always been around, and has their role kind of evolved over the years?
I think so. I think they've been around from the beginning. And the reason I say that, the first company that really did this was called Lyons Band Instrument Company.
Okay.
And they were based here in Chicago. They helped start the Midwest Clinic. It was Howard Lyons, H.E. Nutt from Vandercook College. He was the band director. And Neil Jost Sr. from Jost Publishing. And Jost Publishing was inside the Lyons Band building.
Okay.
And so they just decided to start a reading session and see how it goes. And as the Lyons Company developed, at one point, I've read because they had a newsletter, ironically enough, back in the 30s. And I was doing some research, and they had reps traveling as far down as Georgia.
Whoa.
To help develop school music and things like that. So I think they've been around. I think it's been refined. I don't think early on they would visit every week, but they would set up bands, and they would, set up programs and orchestras and things, and then probably be available if needed, but not a weekly, run to the school. It seems like that came around through competitive pressures, at least in our area, probably more in the next generation, like in the 70s and 80s, where it became a fixture that we have a team of road reps that visit schools on a weekly basis, kind of thing.
Okay.
So I think it's been around in some sorts. And of course, it has changed a lot with COVID because the tools have changed. Now we're using a lot more technology. I guess we always have, when cell phones came along, and, all kinds of connectivity and texting and teleconferencing has really changed that role over the last couple of years. But it seems like the basis of that face-to-face meeting, somebody has to go pick up the repairs. Somebody has to return them. So you can't do that through the internet, as far as I figured out.
Right. It goes back to that relationship, right?
Yeah.
Growing that in-person, face-to-face, you can't replace it.
Yeah. Yeah. There are certain businesses that just will never be able to be e-businesses, barbers,
right.
dentists, you just can't do it over the internet. So,
right.
I think school ed reps are one of those professions that somebody's going to have to get in a car and drive.
Right. They'll always be out there.
Yeah, I think so.
So another question I had, again, from your business owner perspective, ed reps are a lot of times in the trenches. They're doing a route day to day. They're busy, dropping off repairs, picking up repairs, dropping off accessories, a lot of, busyness and logistics like that. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, what really is the profit center of a music store? What are the really important things that ed reps need to remember while they're out there?
Yeah. Well, for most of us, it's the beginner rental program. Whether it's string program or band, it happens every year. Well, except for COVID years. Mm-hmm. Like clockwork, they start a new batch of beginners, and you want to be in the position where you're the recommended vendor for mm-hmm. their school. Mm-hmm. And everything else we do supports that. It's helpful, that we have good repairs, and like you say, we supply reeds on time and all those things. But from most school music dealers' perspective, the beginner rental program is vital. Now, what can happen, because there's two sides to every coin, what you can't do is ignore those teachers that don't teach beginners, because they need service as well. So right. If you have a large district where they have a beginning band teacher and a beginning orchestra teacher, but you don't pay as much attention to the middle school and the high school teachers, they will have an equal vote when it comes time to choosing the vendor they want.
Right.
And if you've ignored them, they're probably going to have a much stronger relationship with somebody else who spent time and energy trying to work with them. So it's, as much as we have to focus on the beginning rentals, we can't ignore everybody else, from 6th grade through 12th. They're very important as well.
Right. The term key influencer comes to mind for those people.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So rentals, I think, is generally known as being the base of the income for a music store. And then there's everything else. Generally speaking, and not just necessarily for Quinlan and Fabish, but just generally speaking for music stores, what's next? What's the next most important thing that generates income for the store?
From our perspective, everything is tied into that. Obviously print, it's mostly method books. Accessories, it's a lot of music stands. So once you get through that, okay, everything that's not tied to a beginner probably becomes the step up portion of the, band and orchestra. And there, you talked about key influencers. Private teachers have maybe even a greater degree of influence than sometimes the orchestra teacher or the band director.
Right.
Just because they work with these more advanced students on a very personal level, one-on-one. And it's difficult for ed reps to build equally strong relationships with private teachers because they're not there during normal business hours.
Right.
And some of them teach from their home, or they have a studio, or, so it's a challenge for ed reps to develop those relationships. But once you have established them, they become maybe the next most important influencer outside of the public and private school band and orchestra directors, because they wield a lot of influence on Step Up business.
Sure. So being involved with Quinlan and Fabish for so many years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of ed reps, and not just at Quinlan and Fabish. Through your roles with NESMD and other organizations, you've got to know other store owners and other ed reps out there. And I'm curious, especially for those who are listening, who are maybe new to the job and trying to hone their skills, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's maybe a new ed rep, who's just getting started, to kind of set them on the right track for success?
I have actually a pretty clearly defined yet very simple goal. And it was my first goal. It's like, particularly if that director that this new rep is serving has been a longtime customer of your company, but you're the new person, so you kind of have to prove your worth. The goal I always had when I first started was, I want that director to utter these words: "You're the best rep I've ever had from your company."
Wow.
And it happens if you work hard and get it done. And if that's your goal, you do everything you can to get there. And you don't know what it's going to take, but that's the goal. When a longtime customer worked with your company for a long time and you're new, you got to prove your worth. You got there when you hear that person utter those words.
That makes a lot of sense. It's simple, but so effective.
And you yearn for it. When you're new, it's like, oh, please, you came so close. I said, you're really doing a great job. Tell me how great I am.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so smart. I like that, George. Thanks. So last question. Is there a memorable time that you've had on the road, something that sticks out? Maybe it was funny, maybe it was moving, maybe it was just particularly interesting. Do you have a good story from the road?
Oh, got a million of them. We got a couple more hours.
Sure.
I'll share one of my favorite, because this teacher just retired. The woodwind tech's nightmare are those contra, alto, and contrabass clarinets that are like the paperclip, where they just keep looping over with a million bridge keys. And they're so difficult to get an adjustment. Now, all of them, because they haven't made them in so long, are 40, 50 years old. Things are wearing out, and they sound great, and the bands still use them. And so the story, we had one that was in the shop, and I brought it back, and teacher called me. This was in the, cell phones still existed. He goes, "Yeah, the kid was just here. It's not working." I said, "Oh, okay, I can swing back in the later of the day. We'll try and figure it out." So a couple hours later, I swing back, and he said, "Let me see if I can get the kid out of class." So, the Wenger and Wenger type chairs that stack, but they don't stack vertically. They kind of go out on an angle of about 20 degrees,
right,
as you add more chairs. So at a certain point, they tip over. So the band director sets the contrabass clarinet on the stack of chairs, and he goes to get the student, and we're walking away, and the whole thing falls to the ground.
Oh.
And I look at him, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Well, let's see what the kid has to say." So the kid comes in, puts the instrument together, goes, "It's all fixed. Sounds great." So I always call it the Vic's School of Instrument Repair. Vic was the band director. Just throw it against the wall, see if it fits. Maybe you can get it to work again. But
you just have to find the proper distance to drop it from. That's the key.
It seems like it. Yeah. I don't know what he did or what that fall cost, but it caused it to fix, and we were both happy.
Oh, that's great. Got lucky.
I think so.
George, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy out there. And for those of us going to NASMD, we all look forward to seeing you in March.
Oh, we all look forward to getting together, don't we? It's been a long
definitely,
run.
Definitely. We do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Shane. I appreciate what you do. And this podcast series, I know it's probably a small select audience, but I've enjoyed all the podcasts I've listened to.
Well, thanks, George. We appreciate that. And if you or anyone out there listening has any thoughts on future episodes or topics, please reach out. We'd love to just give you what you would like to hear.
Sounds good.
We hope you found the information in this episode useful and something you can use in your everyday life as an ed rep. If there is a topic you'd like to learn more about and have presented on a future episode of Ed Rep Radio, or you'd like to give us some feedback in general, please email us at edrepradio@eastmanstrings.com. To learn more about Eastman Music Company, go to our website, eastmanmusiccompany.com, or give your Eastman rep a call. Thanks, and drive safe.